Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Cosmic Diva here, and I wanted to, of course, share some stuff with you guys. Very interesting. Nothing definitive, just some interesting stuff I found interesting. Do you think that there may be a correlation between volcanic eruptions and the weather? So currently we're in the United States. I am. And we are dealing with Hurricane Matthew. Very large and scary hurricane that has already taken, I believe at last time I checked, 8 lives and done quite a bit of damage that we just haven't even seen all of yet. It is scheduled to touch the tip of Florida today through the weekend. They're already experiencing a lot of stuff, and certain places have already been placed under mandatory evacuation. It's just not a good thing. So I started to wonder what makes some of these hurricanes appear. And in light of all that we're researching and all of the man-made weather and the fact that we are currently in the age of the Anthropocene, which is where man affects all of, or at least a great portion of things that we are dealing with now, the man affects the earth and all that, I started to wonder, is it possible that man could aid in the creation of a hurricane or a storm, a tropical storm? I mean, we can do things to create rain. We can do things to make clouds. So would it really be so far of a long shot out of my mind to imagine being able to influence the weather by making a volcano go off and release sulfur dioxide into the air and create an effect that does something else? I don't know. I'm sure a lot of us haven't even really considered that. So I started doing some digging around, and incredibly enough, there's some stuff on it. There's not some stuff. There's a healthy amount of articles discussing volcanoes and their effects on weather. So what you're looking at right now on screen here is a few pictures and some stories I found talking about volcanoes and this not so nice air that they release, the ash, and what that can do to our sky. Then I found an article by the Royal Meteorological Society, and they discuss how can volcanoes affect the weather. According to them, observations of past eruptions throughout the world suggest that volcanoes can have an impact on weather and climate. And then they give a breakdown of 4 historic eruptions and their observed effect on global temperatures. One of the first ones they recorded or decided to discuss was Laki, Laki. This was recorded in 1783. This volcano in Iceland erupted, and European winter temperatures were abnormally low the year after, and the eastern U.S. recorded the lowest ever winter average temperature between 1783 and 84. It was about 4.8 degrees below the 225-year average. Benjamin Franklin theorized that the cold conditions were a result of the dust and gases produced by the volcano, which blocked out sunlight. The eruption also poured out masses of basalt lava. Franklin's theory is consistent with thinking that large hypothesis is consistent with current thinking that large volumes of sulfur dioxide, also known as SO2, are a culprit in haze effect global cooling. Another historic eruption was Tambora, recorded in 1815. Mount Tambora in Indonesia erupted and was followed by an extremely cold spring and summer in 1816, which became known as the year without a summer. The Tambora event was believed to be the largest in the last 10,000 years. Europe was hit hard, and snowfalls and frost occurred in June, July, and August. All but the hardiest grain crops were destroyed, forcing farmers to kill their animals as they could not feed them. Sea ice migrated over shipping lanes, and glaciers advanced to lower than normal heights. The next one is Krakatau, spelling Krakatau. One of the best-known eruptions. Krakatau in Indonesia generated 20 times the amount of volcanic matter released by Mount St. Helens in 1980. Krakatau was the second largest recorded eruption in history, second only to Tambora. For several months after the eruption, the world had unusually cool weather. The distinctive red sunsets and prolonged twilight, all due to the spread of particles through the air. There was considerable debate about the origin of the brilliant sunsets, and the eruption also inspired artists. Pinatubo in 1991 was the latest in the 4 eruptions covered here so far. Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines erupted in 1991. Within a few weeks, Mount Hudson in Chile also erupted. Observations collected after these eruptions show that mean world temperatures decreased by about 1 degree Celsius over the subsequent 2 years. Now, obviously, there have been many more eruptions than the ones I just named, but those examples give a good idea of the effect of a volcanic eruption and what it can do to global temperatures. So what I'm showing you here is an article from weather.com. This was from August 3rd, 2016, regarding 3 Indonesian volcanoes that erupted, sending ash clouds all throughout the region. 3 volcanoes in Indonesia have all covered the skies in a cloud of ash that is disrupting flights in several parts of the region. Mount Rinjani on Lombok Island near Bali. You can see some pictures here. Now there was 3 of them. Mount Rinjani, the Sinabung volcano on Sumatra Island, and Mount Gamalama in the Moluccas chain of islands, all erupted within 3 days. No one was injured, but flights at 2 airports had been disrupted at that time. The 3 mountains are among 130 active volcanoes in Indonesia. The archipelago of 250 million people is prone to earthquakes and volcanoes because it sits along the Pacific Ring of Fire, a string of faults which lines the Pacific Ocean. Now, if you're familiar with the Ring of Fire, you can find it on a map, Google it, whatever. You'll see that it pretty much wraps around the Pacific Ocean and all territories right along it, okay? And over the last year or two, it's been very busy. I mean, we've been having a lot of heavy earthquakes around here. And is there some man-made reason for this? I don't know. Could be cosmic. Could be celestial. Who knows? That's what I'm looking at now. Now, Indonesia's disaster mitigation agency said that Gamalama and Cinnaberg erupted and it blasted debris high into the air. Hot ash tumbled down the Cinnaberg slopes as far as 2,000 meters southward into a river. They evacuated at that time about 13,000 people. So we can look at some of the images here. Now, moving ahead from that, OregonState.edu also has an article about how volcanoes affect the atmosphere and climate. The first photo shows a large white billowing eruption plume being carried away in a westerly direction by the weak prevailing winds. At the base of the eruption column, there's a layer of yellow brownish ash, and it's being distributed by lower level winds. Pretty interesting. The next picture you can see is a space shuttle showing Mount Spur Ejecta, which is circling the globe. The main effect on weather right near a volcano is that there is often a lot of rain, lightning, and thunder during an eruption. This is because all the ash particles that are thrown up into the atmosphere are good at attracting, collecting weather droplets. We don't quite know exactly how the lightning is caused, but it probably involves the particles moving through the air and separating positively and negatively charged particles. Another problem in Hawaii involves the formation of VOG, or volcanic fog. The ongoing eruption there is very quiet, with lava flowing through lava tubes and then into the ocean. Up at the vent is an almost constant plume of volcanic fume that contains a lot of sulfur dioxide. This SO2 combines with water in the atmosphere to form sulfuric acid droplets. They get carried away in the trade winds around to the leeward side of the big island. The air quality there has been really poor since the eruption started in 1983. As for the worldwide effects of volcanic eruptions, this only happens when there are large explosive eruptions that throw material into the stratosphere. If it only gets into the troposphere, it gets flushed out by rain. Well, that sounds like fun. The effects on the climate haven't been completely figured out. See, I'm starting to not believe this. It seems to depend on the size of the particles. Again, mostly droplets of sulfuric acid. If they are big, they let sunlight in, but don't let heat radiated from the Earth's surface out. And the net result is a warmer Earth, also known as the famous greenhouse effect. If the particles are smaller than about 2 microns, then they block some of the incoming energy from the sun and the Earth cools off a little. That seems to have been the effect of the Pinatubo eruption, where about a 0.5 degree of cooling was noticed around the world. Of course, that doesn't just mean things are cooler, but there are all kinds of effects on the wind circulation and where storms occur. An even more controversial connection involves whether or not volcanic activity on the East Pacific rise can cause warmer water at the surface of the East Pacific, and in that way generate an El Nino. Doctors at the University of Hawaii have noticed a strong correlation between seismic activity on the East Pacific rise and El Nino cycles over the past 25 years. Interesting. So let's move on ahead and have a look at some of the supervolcanoes that are busy. I'm not looking at everything, just some of the stuff in my nearby ring of fire. Currently, we've got some activity going on in North Korea. Right. And then if you look down towards South Korea, between South Korea and Japan, you'll see that there's a tropical storm happening at the same time. Very interesting. And it's interesting because I don't see anybody talking about this thing on the news. Now, having a look at our ring of fire, let's go over to Matthew. Matthew's a busy boy, and you can see here on the map that it looks like there's more than one storm happening at the same time. We've got some twins going on. And I don't think these are the kind of twins we are enjoying in this lifetime. Now here you can see that there indeed on October the 1st was a volcano eruption. This was in Mexico, Nevado de Colima, and this is in the states of Jalisco and Colima. And if we just pan on over to the right, you'll see one of our storms going on here. Well, a hurricane. I guess it doesn't want to be called a storm, so we'll call it a hurricane over here, and then a tropical storm next to it. Tropical storm doesn't look like it's going anywhere. It's probably not that happy about it. But Matthew is definitely going places, coming for a visit to the States. Now you see up at Nicaragua, they recently had an earthquake. We see some earthquakes also around Puerto Rico. Now if you look, there's a couple of storms going on. Hurricane Matthew has definitely brought friends and does not care about our feelings at all. So we see here around our ring of fire that we've got some hurricanes and some tropical storms and some earthquakes. But what's not recorded on that map is the supervolcanic activity happening. Now there's a site called Earth, and it shows you a map of the wind, weather, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide. You could check the temperatures of things, and you check out the chemicals and particulates. One of the chemicals being sulfur dioxide, SO2, and its levels as of current. Now looking at the Earth satellite thing here, you see our two tropical storms. Tropical storm and hurricane. And you can see the direction of winds and which way the lovely sulfur dioxide is blowing. Back to our disaster alert map. We see our volcanoes And they are listed here on the map because they're busy. They're doing stuff. Now, what we have here is from the Philippines, and this was September 22nd. At least 8 volcanic eruptions were recorded on Mount Bulusan in Sorsogon province in a 24-hour monitoring period from Wednesday to Thursday. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology said on Thursday, FIVOLX, in a bulletin issued at 8 a.m., Alert Level 1 remained hoisted over Bulusan to warn people of an abnormal activity. The resident volcanologist stated that earthquakes were probably due to hydrothermal pressure. Seismic instruments that recorded the quakes on Bulusan posted no intensity, meaning these were triggered by steam-driven pressure that led to fracturing of cap rocks beneath the volcano's vent. He also stated fears that the quakes could pose danger. The magnitude was minuscule, though, and asked the residents along the volcano's slope, including visitors, to avoid venturing into the 4-kilometer permanent danger zone. And that was due to the possibility of sudden steam-driven eruptions. Volcanologists observed a weak emission of white steam plumes that drifted west-northwest. The agency said bulging at the volcano's edifice was observed, indicating that the volcano remains restive. Residents along the rivers and streams near the volcano's slopes were also alerted against rock and lava flows in times of heavy rain. Pilots were also warned to avoid flying close to the volcano's summit ash because it could damage the aircraft. Right. Over the 24 hours of that recording, the volcano continued to spew a slightly bluish plume. All right. Super interesting. And here we are with our Earth model again. Now the darker spots, the darker it gets, the higher the levels of sulfur dioxide being recorded in the air. Okay. Now, with this model scale here, you can make changes and you can see what our air looks like higher up in the atmosphere as well as surface. You can also spin this globe around and look at the wind patterns. Creepy, eh? So, scooting right along through this, I want to show you something else it gets weirder, don't worry. So, off to Google I went, and I looked up volcanic eruptions and weather in Google Patents. See, I think Google Patents is always a fun place to start looking at stuff, because if you can think of it, somebody may have tried to patent it. And that can be, well, one entrance to the rabbit hole. If you're not looking to go down the rabbit hole and lose your day reading patents, don't do it. So what I found is a patent on a method for cooling the troposphere. I'll just read this briefly to you because it gets deep. Okay, the abstract of this all is self-initiated cooling of the troposphere, which normally occurs by enriching the same with at least one substance from the group of inorganic chloride and bromide compounds. The substances used to this end are characterized by at least one of the properties: gaseous, vaporous, hygroscopic, hydrolysable. The formation of the substances used to this end is further characterized in the process in accordance with the invention by at least one of the steps: forming the substance using salt water electrolysis, forming the substance outside of combustion processes, forming the substance in the free troposphere. Now, the description of this is a technical process to cool off the troposphere by enrichment with halogen-containing hygroscopic aerosols. The process is based on the addition of at least one gaseous or vaporous substance selected from the group of inorganic chloride and bromide, blah, blah, blah. Now, you might want to read this because it gets deep, y'all. So what they're proposing here is, this goes back to putting stuff up in the sky, in the clouds. One of those, here's a list of some of those things you can see here: metallic iron, metallic titanium, elementary silicon, iron silicon alloys, iron titanium alloys, silicon titanium alloys, elementary sulfur, iron sulfur compounds, especially iron sulfide. Could this explain our really, really seriously red skies that we get from time to time? I don't know. Let's see what else I ran across. Atmospheric injection of reflective aerosol for mitigating global warming. Okay? You could just type in this stuff, dude. What I decided to go look at, though, was the system and method of control of the terrestrial climate and its protection against warming and climatic catastrophes caused by warming, such as hurricanes. Yo. The system of the control and protection of the terrestrial climate relies mainly on civilian airlines burning sun shading fuels in the high levels of the atmosphere in order to reduce the intensity of the solar radiation reaching the Earth's surface. The use of sun-blocking airline fuels for the protection of the Earth from solar radiation parallels the use of sun-blocking skin creams for the protection of the individual. The invention parallels the cooling effect on the Earth's climate caused by major volcanic eruptions, collisions of the Earth with asteroids, or the cooling effect one could expect after a major nuclear war. This invention proposes the creation of controlled mini-nuclear winter. In other words, of a cooling caused by the increased refraction of the atmosphere or by the increased shading of the terrestrial surface by particulates in the high levels of the atmosphere. I'm not going to read anymore because you're going to have to look for yourself, man. I got freaked out after I started reading this stuff, though. So, if you ain't into getting freaked out, don't mess with it. But I'll give you a little hint. This article, this patent, discusses some wild, wild stuff, like putting some of our nuclear waste underground or dropping it, into volcanic lava underground, using volcanic ash to cool us off, and, well, ways to make volcanoes erupt. Man-made ways to make volcanoes erupt. Back to the disaster map. Man. So since we can't really see what's going on up in North Korea, because I don't think they're fucking with us like that, kind of makes you wonder. Well, you don't really have to wonder. You can go to Wired.com, who wrote an article a while back, 2012 in fact, how to trigger a volcanic eruption on purpose. I said that. How to trigger a volcanic eruption on purpose. You are going to have to read that for yourself. Okay, on to the next thing. Nuclear volcano eruptions and patents for such. Because yeah, who would do something like that? Who comes up with the idea to patent a method for making volcanoes erupt? That's deep. That is deep. That is so deep. Okay? It's so deep, I ain't even reading this to you. Just, you can see what I'm highlighting here. I ain't even reading this, okay? I'm just not. Because this is craziness. This is... But I guess at the end of the day, what are we supposed to do with the nuclear waste? We could shoot it off into outer space and hope that gravity doesn't bring it back. Or, I mean, we got all these rockets. Why not just take it to another planet and leave it there, yeah? Nah. Let's store it on Earth. Let's store it in the oceans. Let's drop it into a volcano. And it's not going to shoot it back up into the sky. No way. Never happened. No way. Can't possibly happen. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Another patent involves the system and method of control of the terrestrial climate. Blah, blah, blah. And then let's move on to waste disposal. Yeah. Let's put our waste into a volcano. See, you were thinking, like, where does waste go? I know sometimes we're all sitting around like wondering, where does the nuclear waste go when they're done with it? What do they do with the nuclear waste? Do they just toss it in the trash can and drive it out to the curb and leave it there? What do they do with the waste? This is a system for disposing of nuclear waste, which essentially includes filling containers with nuclear waste and then dropping the containers into the sea in the path of an undersea volcano, which is pouring lava onto the seabed. The containers are driven into the seabed and hopefully will be covered by the lava. Again, you're going to have to read that yourself. I ain't going there, okay? I'm not going there. But you can clearly see lots of people have hopped into the patent game and are very interested in ways to get rid of our radioactive and nuclear waste. Whoopity-doo. So, yeah. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting. And no doubt, this is obviously proof that we are in the new age of man, the Anthropocene, where we do some really fucking way out shit to fuck with the planet, to fuck with our skies. I'm sorry, I have to cuss because that made it difficult for me to sleep last night after I read this stuff. Like, We don't even consider, what do they do with the nuclear waste? Why aren't we informed of this? How much stuff is happening in the ocean that looks crazy to us or wild, or we're calling it one thing, but it's really them dumping waste in the ocean? Is this why our oceans are dying off, or is it a melting ice cap? And once they drop this stuff into the ocean, who goes back to check and make sure it's still good, that it's still covered and intact? Does this device that gets dropped into the ground, does it break apart? Does it crack? What happens over time as it's exposed to lava and and the ocean floor, which has got to have some salt content to it, right? Doesn't salt break down stuff over long periods of time? Does it rust? Does it rust out this trash can that they've dropped? I don't know, but it's crazy. I'm sorry if this took you somewhere else, but all of this I think is worth a mention. And if you are anywhere on the East Coast of the United States, I hope that you are on your way to safer ground, and I hope that everything remains intact. It doesn't look like it, but know that I think more than myself, I think I speak for a lot of people to say that, we are saying a prayer for all of you, saying a prayer for ourselves too, considering they just found a new fault line over here on the West Coast, and we're having a swarm of earthquakes ourselves over here. But could that have something to do with the volcanoes? Could that have something to do with the hurricanes? I don't know. I guess we'll just have to watch and wait and see and pray and hope that the prayer doesn't include tucking our heads between our legs and kissing our asses goodbye. Thanks for checking out my video. Everyone, take care of yourselves. Be well. And let's be human.
Peace.